All right, so we're going to sort of pivot a little bit and get into the kind of Talmud that is really meta in the sense that it's talking about how does Talmud function, right? That is what this section of text is going to be interested in. So what I want you to do is open to the single page I gave you, which was the Mishnah, the very first Mishnah. And we've spent the last couple of mornings sort of starting with the original text. I think I gave it to you. It's just on page 249. And the reason being is everything that we're learning is sort of in relationship to this Mishnah. And so as a result, we need to have it fresh in our minds. So what I want you to do is, even though there's 4 paragraphs in this section, the rabbis see this as one unit. This is a single Mishnah, right? Now the Talmud will sometimes quote more than one Mishnah at a time. That's fine, but for our sake, that's the case. So can I have someone read for me the Mishnah in English? Go for it.
There are 4 days in the year that serve as New Year, each for a different purpose. On the 1st of Nisan is the New Year for kings. It is from this date that the year of a king's rule are counted. And the 1st of Nisan is also the New Year for the order of festivals, as it is determined which is considered the first festival of the year and which the last. Okay,
let's just pause because this is going to become relevant. So we have 4 days of the year that are New Year's. The 1st of Nisan is the first for 2 separate reasons, for kings and for festivals. And who is this text attributed to? It's a trick question. There is no name. This section of text is not attributed to anybody. And in general, when a text is not attributed, we assume it's Rabbi Meir. Okay? So the way this worked is there were all of these teachers at a particular time, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was sort of the student of all of them. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Akiva, all of these folks. And he basically collected all of their Torah and organized it and published it into a document. And of course, I'm not using the word written because a lot of it was memorized. And so Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is the editor, the redactor of the Mishnah.
I'm not confused.
Yeah.
You have Yehuda and Meir. Correct?
Right, so Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is the student of all of these different teachers. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva, a famous story. There's a Rabbi Nachman, there's a Rabbi Shimon. Some of the names we've already encountered. And he becomes the editor. He learns all of the story and he creates the editor. He basically is the one.
He wrote it down?
I can't say that he wrote it down because it was probably memorized and not written down until later. But he's the one.
Miss anything important?
Well, that's why there's all those Breitot, right? So he's the one who creates the Mishnah as a document. Okay? And so he's the one who's editing all this together, and he edits, according to tradition, that Rabbi Meir is the position that's not written down, that's not attributed. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but Rabbi Meir is a contemporary of who else? Or
Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And I found the chart that you wanted, of all of the rabbis, but it is in Hebrew.
Oh,
so
that's good.
So I have it. I know exactly where it is to give to you. So
this is early second century.
So let's keep going.
On the 1st of Elul is the new year for animal tithes. All the animals born prior to that date belong to the previous tithe year and are tithed as a single unit, whereas those born after the date belong to the next tithe year. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say the new year for animal tithes is on the 1st of Tishrei.
Great. So we read a little bit of Talmud on this also. The 1st of Elul is our second new year for specifically animal tithes, right, which we spend a little time on, but we didn't spend a lot of time on. And then we get an alternative position.
Another month.
Right, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon disagree with the anonymous voice of the Mishnah, which is called the Stam Mishnah, S-T-A-M Mishnah. Stam Mishnah is the anonymous voice. And we have Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon who say the animal tithes are not in Elul, but rather the 1st of Tishrei. Everybody with me so far? All right, now we're going to go into our Talmud.
What about the last two paragraphs.
Would you like to read those, have them fresh in your mind
Is
as
it
well?
appropriate at this point to read these two?
Sure, why not? It's good to have them fresh in our minds.
On
Go
the
for it.
first of Tishrei is the new year for counting years, as will be explained in the Gemara. For calculating sabbatical years and jubilee years. From the first of Tishrei, there is a biblical prohibition to work the land during these years for planting. For determining the years of Orla, the 3-year period from which a tree has been planted, during which time its fruit is forbidden, and for tithing vegetables, as vegetables picked prior to that date cannot be tithed, together with vegetables picked after the date.
So we have another new year, which is Tishrei, specifically giving the context of the Jubilee and sabbatical years, and no attribution to name. Keep going.
On the first of Shabbat is the new year for the tree. The fruit of a tree that was formed prior to that date belongs to the previous tithe year and cannot be tithed together with fruit that was formed after that date. This ruling is in accordance with the statement of Bet Shammai, but Bet Hillel says the new year for trees is on the 15th of Shabbat.
Right, Tu B'Shvat versus the first of Shvat.
So I understand why you wanted to stop after the second paragraph, but I think it's good that we covered
Yeah.
the entire section, so we have an idea of what's in it.
Right.
And
This will probably be one of the few times where we've read it all the way through again since we started in June. So it's good to do it.
This is not a time to ask how we straighten this mess out for the trees in two different
Right,
places.
so
Don't ask.
Right, whereas of the Steinsaltz clearly adds for us that it's going to be discussed in explicit nature in the
some
Gemara.
point, yeah.
Right? All right, so let's go
All right.
back to the Gemara.
I have a question though.
Yeah.
Nissan is coming up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything is coming up if we go all the way around.
So is this a big time in Israel or anywhere else?
You mean like the first of Nisan?
The first Nissan.
It's a really good question. So, in some sense, it is in terms of the context of Passover, but I have never seen anything where someone says, "Hey, it's the New Year for Kings," or New Year. I haven't, but that's a really interesting question. Maybe we will devise a new tradition, and between now and next year, we'll prepare something.
We're doing the Hallel this Saturday because of it.
Because it's
countdown. It's
that's
just-
a Rosh Chodesh.
We are counting down to Pesach, and I think everybody is distracted from everything
The
else.
vows start, Mark. The first of Nisan, the vows.
Right. And the New Year for
Why isn't there a
Kings.
big deal? Well, to answer it right now.
But it's a great question.
no, we should answer it now. Are you suggesting that we have a king?
No.
I'm suggesting we do something
We
to
have a
make
thing.
Pesach
Yeah.
easier.
Right.
Maybe we shouldn't celebrate.
Well, here would be another question, right? Which is, perhaps Israeli elections should follow the first of Nisan. Meaning to say, I'm not making a political statement. I'm saying like, it's an interesting case where if we say political leaders, their new year is the first of Nisan, and Israel is a Jewish country in which wants to own those things.
But it's not a king.
No, I know that. And I didn't say a king. A political leader is why I said that.
I know.
But it would be an interesting case to see, well, maybe there was a correlation early on in the government. I doubt it, but I'm just saying. Right? That would be an interesting manifestation. Synagogue leadership could follow the first of Nisan. Right?
I'm not referring to the election, I'm referring to the vows. That the accounting of them starts now. So
Right.
why isn't there a big deal being done on social media and everywhere? Okay, how many vows have you done? And what's your recording of vows, your counting of vows?
And where do we actually have that conversation? Because we do have that conversation every year. When do we have it?
Oh. Well, Hashanah.
Yom Kippur for Kol Nidre, right? All the Nidarim, all of the vows. So it's an interesting question. I'm not going to answer it because I don't have one, but it's a really good question. Yeah.
But I totally get why the New Year is, he who determined, and they would actually fight about, back in the day, the rabbis would we're fighting over this calendar. I mean,
Right.
it was an issue.
They're certainly navigating it, right?
And so when you when you set the first of Nisan, and that's going to determine, your life over the next couple of weeks for Pesach, it's a big deal.
Yeah. All right, let's jump in it because I think that this won't necessarily answer your question, but I think will offer us some interesting insight into it. All right. So we're right in the middle of page 277, right in the middle of 7b. Is everybody with me? Great. We read this first couple of lines last week, but we're going to read them again. Rich, will you read them for us?
Absolutely. Where do I start?
The Mishnah states, right in the middle.
It's good. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No?
In the Aramaic first. The second line, it says the word mani. We talked a little bit about last week about the word ma'an, mem, aleph, nun. This is very related to that. This is asking the question of who. Right? So we have a quote from the Mishnah, which we know because it's punctuated, not because we would otherwise know that. It says mani. It has an answer, and then it says Ditanya. Right? Which means the de is like asher, that. So it'll often introduce sort of a proof text or a second clause. Does everybody see that?
I'm sorry, what is Mani?
Mani means it's a question asking who.
Who is it?
Right. All right, now you can read it.
Okay. The Mishnah states, on the first of Elul is the new year for animal tithe.
Which we just read.
Yes, we did. The Gemara comments, who is the author of the opinion cited in this Mishnah? It is Rabbi Meir.
Right, which wouldn't be a surprise for us because we would know that the anonymous voice in the you pass this to Cindy, Brandy. Which we would know as students of Talmud that the anonymous voice is Rabbi Meir, right? So we're not surprised by that. I know I'm the one who just told you not to be surprised, but next time you encounter it, you won't be surprised.
I do have a question about Rabbi Meir later.
Okay.
Later.
All right, keep going.
Okay, sorry.
It is Rabbi Meir.
Yes, it is Rabbi Meir. As it is taught in a Mishnah that Rabbi Meir says, on the first of Elul is the new year for animal tithe.
All right, what convenient proof, right? Rabbi Meir, we have a quote that says the exact thing we want. It says Rabbi Meir says it, right? Very convenient. So we have a statement from the Mishnah without attribution. The Gemara reasonably asks, who said this? We have an answer and a proof text, right? As convenient as it may or may not be. Everybody with me? All right, keep reading. Read another paragraph, Chris.
Absolutely.
And you'll see again a quote at the very beginning for Velir Galim, Mani. You'll see in the Aramaic.
Rabbi Shimon this time.
Right? It's Rabbi Shimon. And we're starting to see an important thing. Now, second line, first word is the word Seifa. Does everyone see that? Does everybody see it?
Yes.
The next line, 3 words in, you'll see Resha v'Seifa. Does everyone see that? Third line, third and fourth words, Resha v'Seifa. What does Resha and Seifa sound like? What Hebrew words?
Rosh and Soph.
Rosh and Soph. So what the Gemara is going to do is it's going to talk about the first half and the second half of the text. The Rosh, the first, the beginning, the head of the text, and the Seifa, the Soph, the end of the text. And it's going to split them up. Why might we split up these texts from what we know in the Mishnah? We just read it. So why might we want to split them up?
So, two opposing opinions.
Yeah.
2 years? 2 different year starts?
So yes, and right, we have 2 different years, and we have 2 different attributes, like different opinions being given, right? We got a couple of things going on that might recommend for us that we split it in half. All right, keep going.
Okay, sir.
So the Gemara asks.
Yes. That Gemara asks, and with regard to the festivals, that is, that the first of Nisan is the new year for festivals, Who is the author of the opinion cited in the Mishnah? It is Rabbi Shimon, who holds that one transgresses the prohibition against delay only if the 3 festivals have passed in their proper order, with Passover first.
Great. Let's go back to our Mishnah really quick. Everybody pull out their other sheet. Show me where it says Rabbi Shimon talks about the month of Nisan.
Doesn't.
It doesn't. Right? So we sort of have a dilemma here being created.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Oh, goodness.
So you said the Mishnah was memorized.
Yes.
That's an interesting comment. So the implication of this is that more was memorized than the Mishnah, or it was written down, or it was.
Right, so it was certainly eventually written down, but it was definitely memorized by people who were memorizing experts, basically. And the Mishnayot were written or devised or structured in such a way that they could be memorized easily. And in fact, you'll see in some schools, kids are memorized Mishnayot. In any case, Rabbi Shimon does not appear in the attribution for the first of Nisan.
But it's right here in the Mishnah.
But he does show up at the
Yeah, it's
end
there.
for
It's
the
the
month, for this Elul statement.
Yes.
All right. All right. Finish the paragraph.
Say the last clause of the Mishnah, which states that Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon says, the new year for animal tithes is on the 1st of Tishrei. Can
Right.
it be that the first clause and the last clause follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, while the middle clause relating to the animal tithes follows the opinion of Meir?
All right. So let's make sure we understand. What is it that's being said, and why does that matter? What is the Gemara telling us? Why is this question relevant?
I don't know, there's just different New Years going on here, and we're repeating some of the things we've learned before, but
Right.
I guess there's lack of clarity because they're still debating.
Right. So it's important for us to understand what the debate is actually about.
They're talking about the age of the animal to be sacrificed when they're born too, because depending on when you start your year depends on how old the animal
Right.
is.
But
when
is
you
that the
come around.
discussion we're having here?
I don't know if that relates into it or not.
The discussion we're having here is who
It's
said
talking
what.
about you can't promise the animal before it's born either.
That's true, but the discussion we're having here is who said what. Right? There's a rabbinic desire to attribute Torah to where it comes from. Right? L'shem Omra, we say it in the name of the person who said it. It's a value in the rabbinic world. So we want to make sure that we're attributing the text to the right person.
It's all going back to Rabbi Meir originally.
Right, so we have a text. We would generally say that an anonymous voice is Rabbi Meir. And then we have a problem, which is we have something that we're attributing to someone else. So we have a text that says Rabbi Shimon, all right, according to this, Rabbi Meir, and then Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, right? Would you organize a document that way? No, how would you organize it?
Maybe you'd say all the things that Rabbi Shimon said, and someplace else you'd say all the things that
You put footnotes. You give write whatever you want, then put footnotes next to each of the statements.
Right, we would say, like, why leave it unattributed? Right, we should have attributed it from the outset, even if it's out of order, right?
I want to back up.
Yeah, please.
This is oral tradition,
Correct.
as opposed to Torah, which we call
Written law. The written law.
written tradition.
Sure.
When were these oral traditions memorized?
Let's
Every
say
year?
the 2nd century, 1st and 2nd centuries.
When were they memorized?
The first,
Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi lived at around 100, 150, 200.
But that's when he wrote it down.
But that's when he finished editing it. It doesn't mean it was written down.
And wait, didn't somebody else organize it? I mean,
So
Akiva.
the
Rabbi
presumption
Yehuda,
is
Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, potentially correct. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was the student of all of those major teachers.
the historical record shows that the origins of Torah go back at least 1,000 years before that. The Silver Scroll, the priestly blessing, which I saw in the Israel Museum. And this historical record, the Dead Sea Scrolls, where editing was still going on in the written tradition at around 2,000 years ago. So why do we insist that this is an oral tradition and there was no writing? None of this. Why are we insisting that none of this was written down?
It certainly was written down. The question is about when it was written down. I don't know the answer to that, but it was certainly memorized in oral text.
Yeah, I mean, so these guys are providing.
You know what? If you're just reading this stuff over the past number of months here, you find out that they start writing down a lot more. You know, as the time gets more
I mean,
modern,
you
right?
can't have you can't have a wait a sec. You can't have a Talmud without writing. Without a doubt, it was written down because you can't have all of this information in people's heads. It's just not possible.
That's my point.
Right.
So we've got Mishnah.
We got more than one layer happening here.
We just said that there was an oral tradition, and students of Mishnah memorized it verbatim, word for word. And now we have Gemara, which came later, supposedly, interpreting, which is building on Mishnah, and it's providing additional information, which they're claiming to know. They're claiming to know who the rabbis were,
Or they're attempting to know. Of various levels of success.
But at least on the surface, it sounds like they're claiming that they actually know.
Yeah. I mean, look, there is a whole discussion in other places of the Talmud, many places, where they disagree as to who a text is attributed to. You say it's Rabbi Shimon, and you say Rabbi Yossi, and it's not resolved. If you're right, then here are the implications, and if you're right, here are the implications.
So
the Gemara doesn't solve that.
My point is, to me, at least on the surface, and the suggestion is that at least some of this stuff was written down.
Yes, and the people, they're called Tanas, right? Partly because it comes from the word Shana, like year, but circles and repetition. The idea is that you would say, memorize. There'd be a dedicated person who would memorize it, and you would say, "Hey, can you read off or spool out the Mishnah on this thing?" And they would just recite it. So you had a resource, but it was eventually written down.
So let's suppose the Mishnah was an oral tradition, and there were a bunch of people who had it memorized. So either there was more stuff that was written down, or there were more stories that went along with the Mishnah.
Absolutely, there
That
were.
were at least semi-memorized.
And what would those? And we've encountered plenty of those. What are those called? Baraitot. Right?
And those probably needed to be written at some point, no?
Well, most Baraitot show up in two locations. There is the Mishnah, the edited document by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. There is a document called the Tosefta, which is a very loosely edited document that runs in parallel to the Mishnah. And then there are Baraitot, which sort of pull from both of those sources. Yes, sir.
Sir, can you, at some point, just like you did a nice reference document.
A document of all these? Absolutely.
Please,
Yes, absolutely.
And I guess my comment to you is that, of course it's written down. if you three are doing the oral tradition, we're hearing it. We and I, three of us, may write it down.
But you better be careful, because if you make one little letter or one little dot mistake, you're changing the meaning of the whole thing.
I understand.
And then you get multiple other opinions.
But that's
and
exactly
everything.
right.
Saying it's a natural tendency for us to
Exactly.
write it
But
down.
that's
So-
exactly right. That's exactly the kind of process we're talking about.
This is not. This discussion is kind of important because I have listened to the proceedings of a conference, on archaeological conference, and I listened to the whole thing. It was fascinating. And there were all kinds of scientific experts, historians, archaeologists, and there were religious experts on Talmud and Torah. And these guys were arguing over the historical basis of Torah.
Wait, so I want to make an important distinction. Which is, what we're not doing is a purely academic study of Talmud.
Of course not.
Meaning to say, we're sort of I am cherry picking what I think is important for us to understand. A traditional way of learning Talmud would not even have most of these conversations, right? I mean, we would have some of it, right? Where we would use the Gemara to explain itself. So I want to, yes, and
So
let's be clear that we're not able to do that. I mean, we are not. Another time we'll set up a time, and we could go on an academic level and show you the layers of Talmud and how things are plugged in later, and how there are different generations who are adding different texts, which you can tell through the language being used, right? Now,
This is not archaeology.
but our study benefits from it. Absolutely,
The point is, the historians and scientists were arguing that oral memory doesn't last for more than 4 generations. You can't go back more than 4 generations. But there is really no basis for saying that this oral tradition really was just an oral tradition, except that's what we call it. It could have been written down.
It was absolutely written down, for sure.
So there is the possibility that a lot more of this stuff is factual than historians and scientists allowed at this conference.
I see. All right, I think that's fair. In any case, for our conversation here, it's relevant, which is to say, this whole discussion we're having right now is a meta conversation. It's a conversation about how does Talmud function? Where did it come from? How do we know that it's true? How do we attribute it? That's the conversation we're having. And so we're stuck because the Gemara is uncomfortable with the idea that this unattributed text is being attributed in such a way that we have one teacher, a second teacher, and that first teacher again. Everybody with me? They're uncomfortable with that dynamic. Cindy, will you read for us the text where it says Rav Yosef?
Rabbi Yosef said, the entire Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef.
Here we go.
Which I want to pause you. I want to pause you for a sec. Which is it's hilarious. It is. Which is like, bah, basically to the rest of it. But I want to point out what Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in the Gemara is known as Rabbi. Right? He's not. His whole name isn't required. When it says Rabbi, my rabbi, Rabbi.
Rabbi.
The student is called Rabbi.
Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the editor of the Mishnah, who was the student of all those other teachers. Correct.
Fascinating.
Yeah. They also call him Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Literally translates to Rabbi Yehuda the Prince. Right? He was a political leader as well. So anyway, so Rabbi Yosef, right, comes in to say, so the Gemara has a conversation, is asking all these questions. Rav Yosef responds to the Gemara, right, the anonymous voice of the Gemara, and says, all of it is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who edits the different teachings of the Tanaim. Nice. Keep going.
It's kind of great, right? It just kind of obviates the whole discussion.
Sort of. Yeah, keep going.
So with regard to the festivals, he calls it according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon.
Right. So how does this solve the problem we were having?
Yeah, basically solve the problem by saying, look, here's the guy who learned from all these other people. And he's kind of pulling it all together for us and saying, like, what was actually meant. Because he's learning them all. So did them too. We consider him the greatest rabbi. So he's going to solve the problem for us.
Right, which is this couldn't possibly be a disagreement or a mistake. Rabbi Yehuda decided,
And it's okay.
right? He decided, he put them in the order. He thought Rabbi Shimon was right about this, Rabbi Meir was right about this, and where he felt that a disagreement would be valuable, he kept it in. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon said.
I mean, it's kind of a great moment, right?
I think this is a powerful moment, which is why I'm so excited about it. Right? Which is, the resolution is to say, the editor has the power here.
This is like saying if you read the last line of the book, there's no need to go back and read the whole book.
It's sort of.
Well, it
How many
does.
books is that really true?
Exactly.
So here's the interesting thing. That's actually a really interesting comment because you can actually read the conclusion of a lot of books. You read the last
Exactly, and you don't need the rest of it.
But what you miss
Is the story how they got there. Yes.
in some ways, particularly I think in Talmud, how did they get there is almost more important than what they
Is
find.
absolutely more
That might
important.
have to do with my love of the whodunits.
Right. Mysteries are definitely.
Oh, I like this.
This is what I've always liked about Talmud study is that it's really not about what the law says. It's about
how you
they
got to
figured
it.
out what was
It's barely who said it.
It's
right?
not even about who said it in a way, yeah.
Right.
Well, except that if Torah said it, it's right.
Right.
It's true.
That's just your opinion.
If we didn't do
all right.
this, nobody would
So-
have anything to do.
So before we go into the next section, I just want to review what we've done, because this is, which is to say, we have a statement. We are attributing that statement to Rabbi Meir. Then we say, well, Rabbi Meir, the thing that you're attributing to Rabbi Meir is in the middle. What about what happens at the beginning? And we say, oh, we attribute it to Rabbi Shimon. But something at the end is attributed to Rabbi Shimon. So then we are sort of put in this awkward position where we have Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, which we wouldn't, if you were editing it, you wouldn't do. You'd either put all of the opinions together, or you wouldn't attribute it, or you do
Or
something
if you
else.
go back to it and find out it was the original one, you don't need all the middle.
Right, there's a bunch of different options here. And so the answer that Rav Yosef gives us,
Or you have a drink
and again,
and
it's
then
not the
a
only
portion.
answer, we're going to keep going. Rav Yosef offers the answer, which is to say, this is about the editor. This isn't really about Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon. This is about the person who put it together for us. And he made an important decision, which is that Rabbi Shimon was right about that, Rabbi Meir was right about this, and where there's a disagreement, I will bring it in. Or an important disagreement. Yeah.
Did you guys see Barry Weiss's article in the New York Times? It's about the city of David and the archaeological digs. For that, and of course the Palestinians live above that. So I'm just saying, it was either it was Sunday's paper, maybe I get it digitally, so Sunday, right? So I'm just saying, there's some relevant stuff from Pittsburgh. Some of the stuff in the news. That's all I'm
Great.
saying.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Mark, will you read for us where it says, the Gemara raises a difficulty? Wait, Sidney, was that you reading? You were reading that. Okay, before you do that, I'm trying to get everybody to read a little bit. I want to point out an important word. Nope. Never mind. Keep going. Yeah, Rabbi, the Gemara raises a difficulty.
The Gemara raises a difficulty. If are there 4 New Years? If the Tana and Mishnah holds that the first Elul is the New Year for the animals, there are 5 New Years.
Right.
The first of Nisan, the 15th of Nisan, the first of Elul, the first of Tishrei, and the 15th of Shvat. Another says early.
But let's pause for a sec. Let's pause. Those are the 5 New Years. What are they? They are the 1st of Nisan for kings, the 15th of Nisan for festivals, the 1st of Elul for animal ties, the 1st of Tishrei, which also is, I don't
That's
have
animal again.
That's no, it's also sabbatical years, right? And then the 15th of Shvat, which was for trees, right? So we don't have 5 New Years, but what do we know can't be true?
Okay, because there are 4 according to
Right, exactly right.
Right, and there should be a sixth, which is, the animal tithes and the fruit tithes then come together.
Right.
Okay.
So all right. So now the Gemara itself, the anonymous voice of the Gemara, raises this difficulty. Now we'll have a person.
Okay, so Rabbi says there are only 4 New Years according to Rabbi Meir. There are 4 according to Rabbi Meir, who removes the New Year from festivals. As according to him, there's no fixed time for which to begin counting the festivals.
All right, let's pause there. We spent a ton of time,
I like
right?
that.
We spent a bunch of time, right? We spent a bunch of time on the festivals, and Rabbi Meir's position, if you remember, was just going to move this here a little bit. You're covering the camera.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. No need to be
I'm trying
sorry.
to get light.
Better that you should be able to read it than the camera.
blurry today.
It's okay. Rabbi Meir said the order doesn't matter, and that So the implication here then is he doesn't care about the New Year for the festivals. Is everybody with me? Meaning to say, the implications of what we learned earlier, we're trying to make these guys consistent. And if Meir is going to be consistent, we're consistent here also. Okay, keep going.
Just
Yeah.
for the record, I see no reason to follow this.
What do you mean?
The details of agreements and disagreements,
Say more.
I don't see
Why does that
I
matter?
don't see the importance of following all those details and keeping them in my head at this point.
Oh, it's very hard to keep them in your head.
Also, too, if the order of the festivals doesn't matter, that goes back and reflects on our do not delay that we started with.
Absolutely right.
multiple
But
pages
remember,
ago.
what we're trying to do is understand
no
the
sense
consistent.
to any
I'll give an
of it.
example
The
why this
process.
matters. It's not just about the process. It is to say, which is, if you ask me a question and I give you one answer, and then a month later you ask me another question, I give you a different answer, I'm being inconsistent. You don't want your rabbi to be inconsistent. You don't want your lawyer to be inconsistent. And so if we are living in a world in which we're trying to follow a Rav in a certain thing and be consistent, we want to make sure that they are being consistent. It's important for us to understand the worldviews. So for example, Rabbi Yossi famously eats chicken and dairy together, poultry and dairy together. It's really important for us to understand why he thinks that.
Because chicken isn't meat to him.
Exactly right. But the implications of that position need to be consistent all the way through. Right? We want these people to be principled individuals. Right? That are consistent in their application of the law. Right? That's why it's important. Is it nearly impossible to remember everybody's position? Absolutely.
So they can't all be right.
Define right.
I don't have to. So if they can't come to the same conclusion, then there
Then we
is
want them
a
to be-
problem with the reasoning process.
No, it means, no, I disagree. It means that they need to be internally consistent. The Gemara is not interested in one law, but it wants whatever you hold by to be consistent when you hold it in other places.
So this is where we get into the issue of community of income, right? So
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it.
one community is going to follow, this stuff according to, Rabbi Meir, and another is going to follow it according to whatever. Everybody decides, whose opinion or what is great.
Here's a great example. A timely one I'm sure we would have gotten into anyway, which is kitniot.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right? Some communities eat kitniot, but we want them to be consistent in their kitniot application. And others don't. We want them to be consistent in that application. That's why this matters.
It's the process. So there are some things that you would think have to be answered in one way, and then they're just minhag or customs. But you can't argue that if it's a custom, you can't argue that someone's right and someone's wrong.
Right. I'm not sure that that's what it's doing. What it's doing is saying, what Rava says, which is, the Gemara brings a challenge, which is, wait a second, we've counted too many New Years for what there is. What Rava is coming to tell us is, no, the text is right, but it's different, it's right differently for every Rav.
Right, so we haven't finished this train of thought. Maybe we need to finish the train of thought.
Let's do that. So Rava says, according to each opinion, there are 4 New Years. For Rabbi Meir, who does not hold that the New Year of the festivals matter because the order doesn't matter, he ignores it, which leaves us with the 1st of Nisan for kings, the 1st of Elul, which is attributed to him, right? The 1st of Tishrei, which is in the Mishnah, and the 15th of Shvat, which is attributed to Rabbi Hillel. Right? That's 4.
Okay, and then according to Rabbi Shimon's opinion, there are 4 New Years. He removes the New Year for animal time, because according to him, it's on the 1st of Tishrei, which is already listed.
Right, so it's the first of Nisan for kings, the 15th of Nisan for festivals. We have a disagreement. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon said animal tithes are in the 1st of Tishrei. Right? Then the 1st of Tishrei in the Mishnah already has its own, so that's the 3rd again. And then the 15th of Shvat, 4 New Years.
So how can they disagree about this stuff if everything was controlled by the priests in the temple?
These guys are after the temple.
Yeah, the temple has been destroyed. Rabbi Hillel probably lived through the fall of the temple. But most of these guys are post-temple.
So I thought we started
And they're pretending.
months ago. I thought we started from the basis that they were trying to reconstruct
Yes.
the way it was when the temple existed,
Yes.
In part, yeah.
in part.
Yeah.
I love
I mean,
it.
These guys are planning to go back and rebuild the temple clearly.
They're certainly imagining it. Whether or not they think it's ever going to happen, probably not. But aspirationally.
Actually, probably at this stage, they probably did think it would happen. Because look,
It only been a couple hundred years.
Exactly.
They were only 100 or 200 years
And
later.
they thought they probably happened again because look, it had happened before.
Right.
With the temple had fallen.
It had been within human memory, which is like meaning to say their grandparents remembered either the temple or its fall or the immediate aftermath. All right,
I think this is why the Catholic world has gone back and it's stuck with one pope, and they don't have to argue any of
But
this.
that's not nearly as much fun. All right,
know.
let's keep going. Turn the page.
Exactly. We should have had each festival and each rabbi on
Wait a sec.
calendar.
So the question was, wait a second, there are 5 New Years. We're on page 278 now. Then we're said, no, there's actually, Rava comes and says, no, there are 4 New Years depending on who you ask. If you ask Rabbi Meir, here are the implications. If you ask Rabbi Shimon, here are the implications. Now, and I'm going to have Mark read because I want to try and get everybody to read. So now we're going to get a different answer. Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak said,
Okay, Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak said in an alternative answer, the Mishnah is to be understood as follows. There are 4 months in which there are several New Years. Since in Nisan, according to Rabbi Meir, there are 2 New Years, for kings on the 1st and for festivals on the 15th.
right, so how does Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak solve this problem?
How does he solve it?
Yeah, he's
He
solving
made
the
it worse.
5.
I think he made it a lot worse. You know?
He's solving the
He didn't solve
5.
anything.
He's solving the 5 New Year problem.
Maybe they shouldn't be calling it New Year's. It's like your taxes are due the 15th, and that's a tax day, but it's not a New Year.
Right. So that's sort of what Rabbi Nachman Bar
Exactly.
Yitzchak
They're
is
not
doing.
called New Year's. They're just a day for certain things that are set
So what
in
he's
stone.
doing. So you had it, and then you went in a different direction, which is what Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak is saying is we're not talking about New Year days. We're talking about New Year months. These are the months in which there are New Years. And since there are 2 New Years in Nisan, they really only count for 1. And so therefore we only have 4 New Years because we're talking about months. Of course, if you look at the Mishnah, that's not really what the Mishnah says at all. But that's okay. Right, it's a creative answer. Right?
No comment. I reserve judgment.
All right.
Okay, so let's learn a little bit more and then we'll call it a day. I want to point out an important word, which is the first word of the next paragraph, the second paragraph on 278. It says Meitiv. Meitiv is always a statement where an objection is coming. We're introducing an objection. It's usually from a Baraita, but not always. All right, Mark, keep going.
Okay. The Gemara raises an objection from the following Baraita. The 16th of Nisan is the new year for the Omer offering, as from this date onward it is permitted to eat from the new crop of grain.
What day is the 16th of Nisan?
It's the day after Pesach, and the first day that you count the Omer.
The first day you count the Omer, the second day of Pesach, right? Okay, keep going.
Okay. But I didn't realize that that's the first day. So that's the first day where it's permitted to eat from the new crop?
I can't say I'm 100% knowledgeable in that particular thing, but it does have a note here. We'll come back to it. The 6th of Sivan.
6th of Sivan is the new year for the 2 loaves, i.e., the public offering of 2 loaves from the new wheat brought on Shavuot, as from this day onward it is permitted to sacrifice meal offerings in the temple from the new grain.
All right, let's pause there.
Okay.
So we now have an extra 16th of Nisan for the Omer, and the 6th of Sivan for the 2 loaves, which is after Shavuot.
Well, the 6th of Sivan, isn't that about the day of Shavuot?
Yes.
That is the day of Shavuot.
Yeah.
But of course, they wanted to make it more complicated than that.
That is exactly what they're doing.
Because the Torah never explicitly says when the day of Shavuot is.
Correct. It says 7.
It's 7 weeks.
7 complete weeks and a day.
And a day.
Exactly.
From Pesach.
Exactly. Which is why we count the Omer.
Which
All right.
is the 6th of Sivan.
Finish the paragraph. And you'll see here, it's going to make it according to Rava, who helped us explain it on the previous page. Keep going.
So, according to Rava, let the Mishnah teach that there are 6 New Years, including the 16th of Nisan and the 6th of Sivan. And according to Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak, let it teach that there are 5 New Years, since Sivan is a month in which there is a New Year.
Right, so according to Rava, we've now added 2 New Years, so we have a problem there. And if you're according to Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak and his solution, right, the 16th of Nisan would be in the same month as the other ones, and we're adding Sivan, and now we have 5 New Years.
So let's say that language is full of idiomatic expressions.
How many parties do you want to have?
And one of the idiomatic expressions is what we translate as a new year. And so the expression we use today for New Year clearly has a different meaning than these guys were thinking.
Yeah.
That doesn't really solve any problems.
Exactly.
But I think it sheds some light on where these guys are going and why it's so hard for us to understand.
So here we're clearly going through a sort of an intellectual dilemma here. It's about a dynamism, right? We're not really solving a problem here, right? Like no one's going to walk away from this having a clear next step, other than a number in their head, right? So this is not coming to teach us about our moral responsibility or our ritual obligations, or this is teaching us something different. This is teaching us about how does Talmud function. It's teaching us about attribution. It's teaching us about counting. It's teaching us about the dynamics of disagreements, right?
If you think about it, though, in terms of New Year, it kicks back into Tishrei for Rosh Hashanah, because that's when we change the date for the year actually starting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so to me, that would make sense that it's the only real dated New Year. The other ones are just times when you have you're obligated to, or you do what you are told to do on specific dates with the counting.
Right.
But the year actually starts
at the same
Rosh Hashanah.
time, and at the same time, Nisan is the first month of the year.
Exactly.
So it's not as simple as one thing or another, for sure. All right. Do we feel like we want to do a little bit more, or do we want to stop here? How are people feeling?
I'm okay.
You guys ready to keep going a little bit more? Let's keep going a little bit more. Okay.
I'm not going to be anywhere till Wednesday for coffee with a canter.
Perfect. All right.
Paula read after.
Right, Paula's going to read. Yeah,
Okay, where would you like me to begin?
You're going to start with Rav
Papa. Okay, it's interesting. All
Right.
the first names are Rav.
Right, yeah, first
I had a
name's
kid
Rav.
tell me. I had a kid say that to me. I'm not going to call that original.
So I want to also point out. I'm going to read this section in Aramaic first, and I want you to hear how different it sounds to the Hebrew, which tells us that it's not an early text. Early texts are in Hebrew, the later ones in Aramaic. And so I just want to put that in our ears for a second. So it says, Amar Rav Papa, Kika chashev midei de chayil me'orta, midei de lo chayil me'orta, lo ka chashev. Right? Doesn't really sound like Hebrew. Right? Here's the important word I want to point out for you, which is the word chashev. It's the one at the end, which is the same word as chashuv, important, significant. Okay, Rav Papa.
Okay, Rav Papa said, when the Tana of the Mishnah counts the New Year's, he counts only those that begin in the evening. Those that do not begin in the evening, he does not count. It comes out, are you starting in the morning, or are you starting in the night?
Yeah.
It throws the whole thing off again.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Since the New Year associated with the Emor and the 2 loaves do not begin in the evening, but only from the time they are sacrificed, he does not include them.
So how is Rav Papa adding to our discussion here? What is he solving? What's the problem he's solving?
Well, so we're now counting 6 New Year's.
Why can't we count 6
He
New Years?
says, but wait a minute, he says the real New Year's are the ones that start in the evening. These are kind of like something that happens during the day, but it's like it's not a real New Year's, which doesn't really start.
Right, we count with the sacrifice, right? Which is during the day, and therefore, because we don't do sacrifices at night. But the problem he's solving is the Mishnah can't be wrong. The Mishnah can't be wrong. It says 4 New Years. We have to end up.
These guys are here to explain the Mishnah.
Right.
Right.
The Mishnah, we
And the
can't
Mishnah
have a
has
conflict.
4 New Years.
Exactly. The Mishnah says 4 New Years. We have to end up with 4 New Years. We can't end up with 6. The whole process, you'll see, is the Mishnah does the same thing, which is we have this text, and they seem to be in conflict. They can't be, they mean different things. The Gemara does the same thing. We have this Mishnah and that Mishnah, they seem to conflict, but they can't, so they must mean different things. The Tosafot do the same thing. This Talmud and this Talmud seems to conflict, but they can't. They must mean different
You
things.
just have to get those certain amount of things done at certain times, designated days apart from each other, and end up at the same place.
Exactly.
And these are the guys that are counting in the Haggadah with your years and your days and your weeks and your. Are you
Someone
studying
needs to
all
tell
night?
these guys that they're not helping clarify the Mishnah.
They really are.
I'll let them know.
You end up in the same place. You end up reading the Torah and finishing it in the same place every year. It all comes to the same place.
It does. All right, let's read a little bit more. Paula?
Okay. The Gemara asks, but there is the New Year for festivals, which does not begin in the evening, as the prohibition against delaying is not transgressed in the evening when the festival begins, but only in the morning after the daily offering has been brought, and one is able to bring the vowed animal to the altar. And nevertheless, the Tana counts it.
Right, which is to say, if I have to bring an offering, why shouldn't that count during the day too?
Why can't you bring your offering in the evening?
So the temple doesn't do any offerings in the evening.
They're closed for the night.
They're closed for the night. The only offering, the sort of way we navigate is every prayer service is attributed to an offering, except Mariv isn't attributed to an offering. It's attributed to the fact that the offering is left burning all night. So we sort of have a problem, which is if we're only counting the days, the offering with the vows is only going to come relevant during the day. So why is it? How can it end up on this list, right?
The Gemara answers, since he had to bring his vow by the festival, he stands liable from the beginning of the festival for transgressing the prohibition against delaying.
Meaning to say what? This is a different answer. Right, we have this answer which is, these festivals that we offer the thing during the day, that's a problem. The Gemara comes and resolves it itself by saying what?
No, it says, he's liable from the beginning of the festival.
Yeah.
That's it,
Has anyone?
Because we have to put a finger on it, and there should be a time for the sacrifice too, right?
Right.
So why don't you do it from the specific time? Why isn't he liable just for the specific time?
That's the question.
Is that the next question?
That's the previous question,
Okay, well, that's the previous question. Okay.
right? Which is, that's a problem.
So he says here, well, it's from the beginning of the festival, we're going to set that as the time, but I don't understand why they set that as the time. Is that just like...
Well, so one answer might be a travel question, right? We don't know. We can sort of come up with reasons. Has anyone been in Jerusalem for Shabbat before? Yeah? Yes, no. So 40 minutes before Shabbat starts, there's like a buzzer.
Yeah, like
You hear it all like a siren all throughout the city. You can hear it. So it's like the moment the siren goes off, you're liable. The festival has begun. You got 40 minutes, right? That's sort of the way that I'm imagining this, which is once you're already on the next day, you're too late. You're already in festival land. I make all the holidays into lands. I'm in Shabbos land, like festival land. Like I can't travel, can't spend money. My passport is whatever. So,
and as much as I hate to, if you said this already, I apologize. But what festivals begin in the morning and not in the evening?
none of them.
Why are they talking?
So they're talking about the offering. They're talking about the offering. The offering is always during the day. So on Shabbat, for example, the offering is on Shabbat morning.
Right.
The offering is on Shabbat, the Musaf, and then in the afternoon, right? And Mincha, right? So the offering isn't on Friday night; it's on Saturday. That's the issue it's identifying. Is everybody with me? Okay, let's.
Oh, I see. I misread it.
All right, let's do one more paragraph, and I'll read it. The Gemara asks further, but there is a new year for the Jubilee, which is when? Does anyone remember from the Mishnah?
From Tishrei.
From the beginning of Tishrei. But there is a new year for the Jubilee, which does not begin in the evening, but from the time of the shofar blast on Yom Kippur during the day. And nevertheless, the Tana counts it. Is this the same problem as we just identified? Basically, we were talking about offerings, now we're talking about shofar blasts. The Gemara answers, the Mishnah is accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, who said that the Jubilee year begins on Rosh Hashanah, and the blowing of the shofar merely completes the release of the slaves. Therefore, the new year for the Jubilee is included. So how does Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, solve it?
It says it's the completion of
Right.
rather than the beginning.
Right, it's not really the new year, right? Now, of course, let's just name the important fact that in ancient world, slaves were taken, and none of those laws remotely apply today. And slavery was wrong then; it is wrong now. I just want to make sure we name it. Let's not gloss over it. But it's sort of not relevant to our text. I just want to make sure we said it out loud, which is to say that we have the same problem, which is we have this sort of New Year's Day problem, and we solve it by, Rabbi Yishmael solves it by saying, actually, we're talking about night. We're talking about Rosh Hashanah like the week and a half before. You see how that's the same solution as the previous? Everybody, yes? No? Mark, yeah?
It's the same problem as the previous.
Right. Meaning to say, the shofar blast on Yom Kippur Day is effectively the same thing as saying the sacrifices for the festival happen during the day, which is we have a day and not a night problem.
Okay.
Right? And the solution of it is to say, no, at the beginning of the festival you're liable, is the same, more or less, as saying Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of your liability. Does that make sense? No?
Well, they're just adding additional complexity to confuse you. Again, I think.
Right. Well, meaning to say, the Gemara is trying to resolve this problem, and like us, it said, well, what about this? And what about that? All very reasonable, right? I'm sure with enough time, we would have come up with some of these things. So the Gemara is putting it together for us to say, here's this problem, here's that problem, and here's how we solved it. Yeah, Mark.
They're not arguing about whether it begins on the Erev Rosh Hashanah, the first of Tishrei, or at the time that the shofar blows. Is that what they're arguing about?
Well, so this is sort of they're not really getting into the detail of each of their references. Okay. They're sort of using them as a concept, which is to say, we have 4 New Years, and we've somehow got stuck with 6. So we have to throw out 2 of our New Years. Okay. Right? And we resolved one of them by saying, right, which is that you're liable at the beginning of the festival, not when the sacrifice is given, therefore solving that problem. And the other one is to say, well, what about the shofar blast? We solve that by saying, no, Rosh Hashanah is when you're liable. as opposed to during the day.
So this is trying to define the term New Year. It doesn't really answer any fundamental religious issues.
Correct. Right, so part of this, that's why I want to preface it by saying this is a meta conversation. This isn't coming to teach us ritual or moral or anything else. This is telling us, how do we think like rabbis? How is the Talmud solving problems? It raises an objection and it solves it. It sort of creates these absurd examples of 6 New Years and then resolves them. Right? It's helping us understand how does this function? And for us as students of Talmud, trying to be able to walk away with important rabbinic and Jewish skills, I think this sharpens our tool set. Right? And I've seen it over the course of the last year. Everybody's tool set being very well sharpened. I'm pretty impressed. All right, we'll stop there for today, and we'll pick up again next week. And we're getting close to Passover, so it's good we're having all these Nissan conversations.
And don't forget to celebrate New Year's.
Right, New Year's is coming.